In this episode, we are going to see how to Dockerize mean stack. So I have published the article on Medium a long time ago. So we are going to use the same repo which is there in that article, and we're going to clone the repository first, and then we'll install all the necessary tools like VS Code, Docker Desktop, and use those tools to run this example project on Docker. And we're going to see how to do that step by step. So without much delay, let's get started. Okay, let's go to the link. This link is already there in the description. You can just go to this link where you can actually see all the step-by-step process of running mean stack on Docker. So here is the introduction, and here are the prerequisites that you need to install on your machine. You don't have to install each and everything. So these are some of the things that you might use while building the mean stack. And here is the example project that we are actually running. And so this is the GitHub link. Let's go to this link. You can copy it and clone it, and go to this link so that you can actually see the whole code on the GitHub. So first, let's clone the repository. So now we have that repository on our machine. Let's import that repository into VS Code. So once imported, you can actually see there are two folders. One is for UI, that is for front end, and one is for API, which is the back end. So we are maintaining two folders, one for the back end and one for the front end. And let's open terminal. And change our directory into API. And first thing what we need to do is whatever the Node.js project that we clone, we just need to install all the node dependencies. That is what we have just done. So once all the dependencies are installed, you can just run the application. Let's go to package.json and see what is the command to run the application. So we have a command called dev. So let's run npm run dev. So once we run the that particular command, it is supposed to run, but we have an issue here where we don't have any connection string. So basically we are using MongoDB as a database. So we don't have any MongoDB on our machine installed, and also we don't have any connection string, write connection string attached. So we need to fix it. So we need to fix that first to actually run the API successfully. So that Mongo connection string is placed in the .env file. Okay, that's the API. So in the later sections, we will fix that Mongo connection string by installing or creating a MongoDB Atlas account. But for now, let's change the directory into UI, and let's install all the dependencies for the UI, and let's run the UI. So all the dependencies are done. Let's start the application. So the application started, and it is running on port 4200. So let's copy this, and so now the application is running. So the UI application is running, so without any issues. So now what we need to do is we just need to fix that Mongo connection string so that our API will work without any issues. So remember, we have a problem with the API where we don't have any MongoDB instance running on our local machine. So for that, we will use MongoDB Atlas account. So for that, we just Google MongoDB Atlas, so that will take you to the MongoDB Atlas page, home page. And so we can actually we need to create an account before we use it. So either you can sign up with Google. If you have a Google account, you can use it to log in, or you can actually create your own MongoDB Atlas account. So I'm using the Google account to log in. So you need to accept those terms of service, and then it will ask you a bunch of questions. What is the primary use of this MongoDB for you? Are you what is the role? What is your role? And which language that you intend to use this MongoDB, like Node.js or any, it's a programming language, or Java, whatever. So since we are using Node.js, so we need to select Node.js, and what type of data that you want to store in this MongoDB. And so let's answer all these questions, and let's click on that next button. So once you click on that next button, you have to choose the tier, serverless, M10 dedicated, or M0. M0 is the free one. So let's choose M0, and it will take some time to get, for the cluster to create. So meanwhile, you can actually look at the security things here, so where you can create username and password, and also you can you can whitelist your IP address. So let's look at all these. And the first thing what we need to do is, since we are going to connect to this MongoDB instance, we need a username and password. So you can just add username and the password, or you can auto generate the password. It's up to you. So since I want to remember my username and password, so that's why I just in production this is not recommended. For this demo purpose, I just created password as tester123, and let's create that user. Let's go to the next section. Since we are actually connecting to the MongoDB Atlas account through from our local machine, so we just need to select my local environment and add your IP address, or you can just add 0/0, which actually allows from anywhere. You can connect to the MongoDB instance from anywhere, that means. And also this is also not recommended in production, so this is only for demo purpose. So once that is done, it actually, once the cluster is created, and once cluster is created, you can connect to the MongoDB instance. So there are so many ways to connect. So since we are connecting to this MongoDB instance through our Node.js application, we have to select that particular thing and take that URL, connection URL, copy that, and let's go to our code base, where if you open API, and if you go to environmental.env environment file, so in which we have defined Mongo connection string. So you have to replace this string, Mongo connection string, with the URL that we just copied from MongoDB Atlas account. And in place of username and password, you just need to put whatever the username and password that you created in MongoDB Atlas account. And also, since we just cloned it from a Git repository, so I named that .env to .env dev, so we just have to rename back. So when you push to Git repository, the .env files will be ignored. So that is the reason why I changed the name. So let's run it again. Still we have some problem here. I think we don't have it in the password. Let's remove that and try to connect again. So after updating the connection string, now the API is running successfully, and we can actually see that. But we have a problem for UI to connect to that particular API. Let's open our UI and let's see whether we're able to create tasks or not. So let's create some task. So we're not able to see that that is listed, since there is an error. It's a proxying error. So we have in Angular, we need to proxy all the API. All the API requests from the UI need to be proxied in a right way. So for that, we need to maintain a proxy config.json. So this proxying API requests is only for development environment. So we usually maintain that in the proxy there is a separate file called proxyconfig.json. Let's open that proxyconfig.json where whether we have a right URL or not. So our API URL is localhost 3080, but here it is something different here, some main API something. So let's change that to localhost so that it connects to the right API which is running on our localhost. So let's restart the UI and let's create the task again. Now we can see the task listed. So now the both front end and back end is working together and we're able to create tasks here. Let's create one more. Yeah, this is great. Now the both front end and back end is working together and we have a we can actually see all the details are saved into database as well, and our MongoDB instance is also working fine from the API. And it's time to get started with Docker. So if we have Docker desktop installed on information, so let's open Docker desktop so that we can run our mean stack on Docker. So here is the Docker file where we are using multi-stage builds. So in the first stage we are building the UI, in the second stage we are building the API, and we are copying the actual final builds from each stage in the third stage, and we are actually running the final command where we are running API bundle.js. So before understanding all this process, we just need to understand how we are building API and UI. So let's go to the UI and let's run the command build command. So here if you notice in the first stage we are running, so we are changing the directory to UI and we are installing all the dependencies, and finally we are running the build command npm run build. Let's do the same thing here. So once you run this command, it actually creates the whole build of your UI application under the folder called dist. So we can see all the files. So we just need to copy these files. We don't have to copy all the application of the UI. We just need to copy whatever built under dist folder, whatever the build files under dist folder, we just need to copy those. And let's go to the UI and let's go to the API and let's run the build command. So here we are giving environment equal to production and we are running that npm run build so that it will take the production environment variables when it is building the API. For that, so it actually plays that build under dist as well with API. It creates only one file which is API bundle.js. So this is the webpack config.js where it actually builds the whole it actually takes the whole configuration from this file. So what is the starting file and what is the way to put your build file and all. So first of all, we just need to change, since we are giving production as an environment variable, we just need to change our Mongo connection string which we have created. So we just need to replace the right Mongo connection string so that it takes the it takes the value where we have just created MongoDB account. So let's rerun. If we rerun, so it actually creates API bundle.js one file for the API and it actually plays in the dist folder. So in the third stage what we are doing, we are actually copying the build files from each stage and we are placing in the Docker file system, and finally we are running the file. We are running API bundle.js. So let's build an image. So we can build the image with docker build. You can give any name, mean stack, and you can tag it with any name. So I'm just tagging with mean stack, and I'm sending the whole context to the Docker daemon with dot. And it actually builds the whole API and UI parallelly. So as you can see, it is building the API and also at the same time it is building the UI. It usually takes some time depending on the application. So if your application is so big, it takes more than usual. If your application is small, it takes depending on your application size and depending on the dependencies that we need to install on each stage, it takes the usual time. And also it depends on the CPU, and it also depends on the RAM that you are running. So it depends on a lot of factors. So always use multi-stage builds so that we can avoid putting all the dev dependencies or node modules into the final stage of the build. So by using multi-stage builds, we can reduce surface attacks and also we can reduce the size of the image. So as the size of the image is lesser and lesser, the startup time of the container is lesser. So now we have built the whole image here, and let's list it out with Docker images. We can see we can actually see that the image that we just created. Let's open Docker desktop and explore this image. So if you already installed Docker image, Docker desktop, you can open it by clicking on the dashboard. So go to the images. So that image is just created now, and go to it, and we can see the file system and what are the images, and is there any vulnerabilities and any packages. You can explore all that stuff. As of now, we don't have any volumes and we don't have any containers yet. So one thing I wanted to mention here, so we are exposing 80 here. It doesn't mean whatever the port that you put on the Docker file, that is the port we are using from the application. So here that is only for documentation, but if you go to the server.js, so that is where the actual port is. So the actual port, the default port is 3080, but so when we are building, we are passing that port as 80. Now let's go to the article where we have this container command. So let's go to the section where we run the container. So this is all the multi-stage builds, and this is where we are running the container. Let's copy this command. So all we are doing here is we are running the container in a detached mode, and also we are mapping the port to the host machine, and we are giving a name. So our container name is app, and since we are running that on 80 port, we are just mapping to 80. So let's run this. So once we run this, we will have a ID, and with Docker PS we can list the running containers. So now the container is running, up and running 9 seconds ago, and we can see the port 80 is also mapped. Now let's go to the containers section of the Docker desktop, and we can see the container as well. From here we can navigate and we can open, and we can see that the whole app is running inside Docker, on Docker. And the front end back end is also working fine, and whatever the tasks that we create, those are saving into MongoDB as well. So remember, we are not running the MongoDB on local, so we are using MongoDB Atlas account. So now we have a running container. We can use exe command to go through the file system of running container. So with bin sh, we can see the file system. So where we remember we placed API bundle.js and also UI folder inside the Docker system in the final stage of the Docker. So that is what we are seeing here. If you go to the Docker file, yeah, that is exactly we created. So that is exactly where we copied all our API and front end, and so with Docker logs and the container name, we can see the logs as well. So let's stop the container. So if we stop the container, it doesn't remove, so it only stops the container. So let's use the command. Let's use the command docker stop container name and docker rm container name to remove the actual container. So app is the container name here. So it takes some time for the container to stop. Let's yep. Now if you list docker ps, you don't see any container listed here. And with ps -a, you can see that container, but it is it is not running basically. And even that application is also not running. With the Docker images, we can still see the Docker images, but we can remove that image as well with Docker RMI. Okay, so that is how we run mean stack application on Docker. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.